A general manager stands over an elderly man's table in the middle of one of the finest restaurants in Boston on a Friday night and humiliates him in front of the entire dining room. Not in a back hallway. Not in a low voice. Right there, under the chandeliers, loud enough that the tables on either side go quiet. Loud enough that his own waiters freeze where they stand with plates in their hands. And the worst part is what he's humiliating the old man for. The old man had asked, quietly, for the table to be set for two. 2 place settings. 2 glasses. A second chair pulled in, the way it always was. And when the manager asked why, when he looked at the lone old man in his pressed, dated suit sitting by himself at a table for 2, the old man told him the truth. That it was his wedding anniversary. That he and his wife had come to this restaurant on this night for 55 years. That she had passed in the spring, and that he had come anyway, alone, to sit at their table and order what they always ordered, and to set her place the way he always set it, because it was the only way he had left to spend the evening with her. And the manager laughed. He laughed, and he said, just loud enough for his staff to hear, that the restaurant did not set tables for people who weren't there. That this wasn't a séance, and that if the gentleman wanted to dine, he could do it like everyone else or settle his check. 3 tables away, a man in a dark jacket who had been eating quietly and bothering no one set down his fork. Watch what happens next. Because the man 3 tables away was Cole Hartley, and what he did over the next 90 minutes did not just give one grieving old man his evening back. It tore the roof off a thing that had been rotting in that restaurant for 18 months. And it changed every single person who was standing in that room, starting with the manager, who had no idea that the cruelty he'd just performed for his staff was about to become the most important night of his life. Stay with me. The reason that manager laughed is the saddest part of this whole story, and it's the part that matters. There is a restaurant in Boston called Beaumont's. It opened in 1951 on a corner near the Common, and for 3 generations it was where the city went to mark the things that mattered. Engagements, anniversaries, the dinner after the graduation, the dinner before the deployment. The dinner you saved 3 months for because some nights deserve white tablecloths. The walls were hung with photographs of half a century of those nights. The waiters wore long aprons and stayed for decades and remembered your grandfather. Beaumont's wasn't just a restaurant. It was a place that held people's important moments for them, gently, and gave them back better. Table 9 was by the window. For 55 years, on the same night every September, Table 9 belonged to Arthur and Eleanor Beck. Arthur Beck was 79 years old, a retired high school history teacher who had married Eleanor in 1969 and brought her to Beaumont's for their first anniversary in 1970 because he'd saved for it and had brought her back every year since. They always sat at Table 9. They always ordered the Chateaubriand for 2. Carved at the table, the way they'd had it the first time when it was the most extravagant thing either of them had ever seen. Eleanor always had the second glass of the Bordeaux she pretended she shouldn't. The waiters had watched the 2 of them go gray together at that window table for half a century. Eleanor died in April. It was their 55th anniversary that September. And Arthur Beck, who had not known what to do with himself for 5 months, decided that he would do the one thing that still made sense. He put on his good suit, the gray one, the one Eleanor liked, and he made a reservation for Table 9, for 2. And he went to Beaumont's to have their anniversary dinner the way they always had it, with her chair pulled in beside him and her place set, because grief, when it's real, doesn't care whether it makes sense. It just wants to keep the appointment. He had no way of knowing that Beaumont's had changed. That 18 months earlier, a new general manager had arrived, and that the man now running the restaurant that had held the city's tender moments for 70 years did not believe in tenderness at all. Spencer Dunmore was 44 years old, and to understand why he laughed at a grieving old man, you have to understand a boy at a dinner table 35 years before. Spencer's father had been a hard man, a self-made contractor who had clawed up from nothing and built a philosophy out of it. A single brutal idea that he hammered into his son the way he hammered everything. The world eats the weak. Respect is fear. Nobody ever followed a soft man anywhere, and he taught it the way men like that teach it, by example, in public, without mercy. Spencer remembered, with a clarity that 35 years had not dulled, the night he was 9 and cried at the dinner table over something small, and his father had stood up and addressed the whole family like a foreman addressing a crew. Look at him. Look. You think anyone's ever going to respect a man who does that? You think the world's going to hand you anything if you're soft? The shame of it had gone all the way down to the foundation, and it had set there like concrete. Spencer Dunmore decided, at 9 years old, that he would never again be the one who got looked at like that. And he kept the promise the only way his father had ever shown him how. He became the one doing the looking. He became, by his 40s, exactly the kind of manager his father would have admired, sharp, feared, in command of every room. A man who ran a restaurant the way his father ran a job site, through pressure and humiliation, and the unshakable conviction that the moment you showed softness, you were finished. He'd been brought into Beaumont's to modernize it. What he actually did was hollow it out. The longtime waiters who remembered your grandfather started quitting, because Spencer ran them through fear, dressed them down on the floor, made examples. The ones who stayed learned to keep their heads down and their faces blank. The photographs still hung on the walls, but the warmth that had taken the pictures was draining out of the place month by month, replaced by something cold and tight and afraid. And the thing about a man like Spencer Dunmore is that he is most dangerous not when he's angry, but when he has an audience. Because the cruelty was never really about the customer. It was a performance. It was a 9-year-old proving, over and over, in front of as many people as possible, that he was the one who did the looking now. So when an old man in a dated suit asked, in a quiet voice, to set a place for a wife who wasn't there, when Spencer Dunmore saw a soft, slow, grieving old man being soft in his dining room in front of his staff, every wire in him lit up at once. Here was the weakness his father had taught him to despise, sitting at table 9, asking for a second wine glass, and here was his staff, watching. He did not see a widower. He saw a chance to teach the room who was in charge. He took it. "Sir?" Spencer's voice carried. "I'm going to be honest with you, because I think it's kinder than letting you sit here like this. We're a working restaurant on our busiest night. I can't set a table for someone who isn't coming. It's not a, what would you even call it, a small laugh, pitched for the waiters. This isn't a séance. If you'd like to dine, wonderful, but you'll dine like everyone else, and I'll have Samuel clear the second setting." Arthur Beck's hands, folded on the white cloth, went very still. "It's our anniversary," he said. Quietly, not arguing. Just explaining, the way you explain something to someone you assume must have misunderstood. 55 years. We always set her place. I won't be any trouble. I'll pay for both, if it's not about the money." Spencer was warming up now, turning slightly so the captain and the 2 nearest waiters were in his sight line. "It's about how we run a room. You understand. You can't just let people," he gestured at the empty chair, the second glass, "do this. It sets a tone. Samuel, clear it." And here is the thing that froze the room. The young waiter Samuel Ortiz, 21, 1 month into his first real job, standing 2 feet away with the bread service, did not move. He stood there with the bread in his hands and his face doing something he couldn't control, looking at the old man and the empty chair and the photographs on the wall of 50 years of nights like this one. And he could not make his hands reach out and clear Eleanor Beck's place. Samuel, Spencer's voice dropped, and now there was a second cruelty layered under the first, this one aimed at the boy. Did I stutter? The whole dining room was silent. Arthur Beck looked down at the tablecloth, at the place he'd set for his wife, and his eyes were wet and his jaw was working, and he was gathering himself to stand up and leave, to take his grief back out into the September dark rather than be the spectacle in the center of this beautiful cold room 1 second longer. And 3 tables away, a man in a dark jacket set down his fork and stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stride over. He crossed the room slowly and he pulled out the empty chair at table 9, Eleanor's chair, and instead of clearing it, he sat down in it, turned to face Arthur Beck, and said, gently, so only the nearest tables could hear it first, "You don't mind if I keep you company for a minute, do you? I hate to see a man drink a good Bordeaux alone." Arthur blinked at him, thrown completely off the cliff of his grief. No, of course." The man turned to Spencer then, and he was not angry, which was somehow worse. "What's the Chateaubriand for 2 run here?" he asked. Spencer, off balance, said the number. "We'll have it," the man said, carved at the table. "And the second glass of the Bordeaux." He looked at the old man. "What was she drinking, Arthur?" "It is Arthur?" Arthur, the old man's voice cracked on his own name. "She liked the Saint Million. She always said she shouldn't, and then had it anyway." "The Saint Million," the man told Spencer. 2 glasses, 1 for Arthur and 1 for the lady's place. We're going to set her place properly, and we're going to leave it set." His voice never rose. "Is that going to be a problem?" Spencer Dunmore felt the room turning under his feet, and a man like Spencer, when he feels control slipping, does the only thing he knows. He reached for more force. "Sir, I appreciate the gesture, but this is my dining room, and I've explained our policy on— What's your name?" the man asked. "Spencer." "I'm the general manager." "Cole," the man said. Cole Hartley. It was Samuel, the young waiter, still holding the bread, who made the small sound. And then it moved through the room the way it always does, table to table, the recognition catching and spreading, the whispers, the phones lowering, because suddenly nobody wanted to be the person filming. Spencer Dunmore's face went through several things at once, and the last one was the beginning of fear, because he had just been cruel to a grieving old man, loudly, in front of his entire staff and a full dining room, and the witness who'd stood up was the last witness on earth he'd have chosen. But Cole Hartley wasn't looking at Spencer like a man about to destroy him. He was looking at him with something much more unsettling. He was looking at him like he recognized him. "Can I ask you something, Spencer?" he said. Quiet now, almost kind. Honestly, not to make a thing of it. He nodded at the empty chair, at Arthur. "Who taught you that this, the old man, the grief, the second wine glass, was something to be ashamed of? Because nobody's born thinking an old man missing his wife is weak. Somebody had to teach you that, and I'd put money on it that they taught you the same way you just taught it to that kid with the bread." Spencer Dunmore opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Give me 5 minutes," Cole said, standing. "Just you and me. Then I'll come back and have dinner with my friend Arthur, and you can run your room however you want. But 5 minutes first." There's a small office off the kitchen at Beaumont's, and that's where they went, past the line cooks who'd stopped pretending not to watch. Cole closed the door. He didn't loom over the desk. He pulled out the side chair and sat, and waited until Spencer sat too, which Spencer did only because his legs had stopped feeling reliable. "You don't know anything about me," Spencer said. The bravado was already gone. It had nowhere to live in that small room. "No," Cole said. "But I know that look you get when you're about to humiliate somebody in front of people. I've seen it before. It's not the look of a man who's angry. It's the look of a man who's scared, and found out a long time ago that the way to not feel scared is to make sure somebody else is the one getting looked at instead." He let that sit. "Your dad? Spencer? Coach? Who was it? Who made you so afraid of being soft that you'd laugh at a widower to prove you're not?" And maybe it was that no one had ever asked him that. Maybe it was that he just felt his whole carefully built authority evaporate in front of the people he'd spent 18 months terrorizing into respecting him, and there was nothing left to protect. Spencer Dunmore told a stranger about the dinner table, and being 9, and crying, and his father standing up to address the family like a crew. Look at him. You think anyone's ever going to respect a man who does that? He told him about 35 years of making sure he'd never be the one being looked at again. He heard himself say it out loud for the first time, and he heard, in the saying, exactly what he had become. Cole listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. "I'll tell you something," he said when Spencer was done. "I came up around hard men too, the kind who teach you that the soft stuff gets you killed. And for a long time I believed them, and I was a worse version of myself for every year I did. You want to know what actually turned it for me?" He leaned forward. "I figured out that the hard men had it exactly backwards. It doesn't take any strength at all to humiliate an old man. A 9-year-old could do it. Yours did. The hard thing, the thing that actually takes a spine, is to be the strongest guy in the room and use it to pull a grieving stranger's chair out instead of clearing it. Your father never once did the hard thing in his life. He just told you the easy thing was strength, so he wouldn't have to feel like the coward he was." He paused. "That old man out there set a place for his wife of 55 years. That's not weakness, Spencer. That's the bravest thing in this entire building tonight, and you knew it the second you saw it. And that's exactly why you had to stamp on it. Because it showed you up." Spencer Dunmore put his face in his hands. "Here's what I think," Cole said, standing. "I think there's a 9-year-old still in there who got told he was contemptible for feeling something, and he runs this whole restaurant now, and he spent 18 months turning every kid out there into a version of himself who's scared to feel anything either. You can keep doing that. Or you can walk back out there and be the man your father told you was weak and find out he was lying the whole time." He opened the door. "Go set Eleanor's place. And mean it." When Spencer Dunmore came back onto the floor, the dining room was holding its breath, and his own staff were watching him the way you watch a storm you're not sure has passed. He did not go to the captain. He went to table 9. And Spencer Dunmore, who had never in his life done the thing he was about to do, pulled the linen and the silver himself, and he set Eleanor Beck's place. The second plate, squared, the second wineglass, the second fork and knife, just so. He did it carefully, with his own hands, in front of everyone, and when it was done he stood beside the old man, and his voice was not the voice the staff had learned to flinch from. "Mr. Beck," he said, "I owe you an apology, and it can't be a small one, because what I did wasn't small. I laughed at the most important thing in this room tonight, and I did it because I'm a coward about exactly the kind of love you've got. Your wife's place is set. It'll stay set as long as you want to sit here. And the St. Million is on the house, both glasses. Hers, too. His voice caught. Happy anniversary, sir. I'm sorry it took a stranger to remind me what this restaurant is for. Arthur Beck looked up at him, and then at the place set for Eleanor, and the old man's face came apart in the particular way a face comes apart when it has been braced for cruelty and handed grace instead. It was Samuel, the kid with the bread, who started clapping. 21 years old, 1 month on the job, still holding the bread basket, weeping openly and not caring. Then, the captain. Then a table by the window. Then the whole room. The warm sound rolling up to a ceiling that had heard 50 years of it and gone cold, and was, in that moment, warm again. The long-time waiters, the ones who'd survived 18 months of fear, were crying too, because they could feel it as well as anyone, that something had just turned, that the place they'd loved had come back into the room. The Chateaubriand was carved at table 9 for 2. Cole Hartley sat with Arthur Beck for the whole meal, and they raised the St. Million, 1 glass and the glass at Eleanor's place, and Cole asked Arthur to tell him about her. And Arthur did, for an hour, 55 years of a woman who said she shouldn't, and had it anyway. And it was, Arthur would say later, the best night he'd had since she died. When the check came, Cole had already quietly handled it, all of it, and he slipped out into the September dark, while Arthur was still talking to Samuel about Eleanor, holding the door for a young couple on his way out. Gone before the old man could think to thank him. Here's the part that matters. The apology was the easy part. An apology is a moment. What came after took years, and it's the only part that counts. Spencer Dunmore did not become a gentle man overnight, because 35 years of believing that fear is respect does not dissolve in one conversation in a back office. But he started. The first thing he did, the very next morning, was something no one at Beaumont's had ever seen him do. He gathered the whole staff before service and apologized to them. To all of them. For 18 months of running them the way his father ran a crew. He told them he'd been wrong about what strength was, that he'd learned it from someone who was wrong, and that he was going to spend whatever time they'd give him learning it over. Half of them didn't believe him. He earned them back one at a time. The slow way. The only way it works. The fear drained out of Beaumont's and the warmth came back into it. And it turned out, the way it always turns out, that the warmth was better for business than the fear had ever been. The long-time waiters stopped quitting. The ones who'd left started coming back. The photographs on the wall stopped being a museum of a thing that used to be and started being a record of a thing that was happening again. Samuel Ortiz, the kid with the bread, the one who couldn't make his hands clear Eleanor's place, Spencer promoted him, mentored him, told him the whole story once, the back office version, because he wanted the kid to understand what he'd been 1 month away from being trained into. Samuel's a captain now. He keeps a card in his apron, in his own handwriting, the thing he learned the night he refused to move. It takes no strength to clear the place. Set it. And table 9 became Eleanor's table. Spencer did that. He had a small brass plate made, nothing showy, and he reserved that window table for Arthur Beck on the same September night every year, set for 2. The St. Million poured into both glasses, on the house, for as long as Arthur lived. Arthur came for 4 more years. And the September after he passed, Spencer Dunmore set table 9 for 2 anyway, for Arthur and Eleanor both, and let it sit empty and lit all evening. and told the staff what it was for, and they have done it every year since. There's a night every September at Beaumont's where the best table in the house stays empty on purpose, and every server in that building knows the story, and not one of them would dream of seating it. Years later, a reporter asked Cole Hartley about the night he sat down at a stranger's table in a Boston restaurant. People expected him to talk about the manager, the comeuppance, the scene. He didn't. "I didn't do anything," he said. An old man set a place for his wife, and a frightened guy laughed at it, and all I did was sit down in the chair instead of letting him clear it. Anybody at any of those tables could have stood up. I just got there first. The brave one in that room was the old man. I was only the second bravest. And barely. I've told a lot of these stories on this channel. This is the one I keep coming back to lately, and it's not because of Arthur, much as that empty chair undoes me. It's because of Spencer. It would be easy to make him the villain. The manager who laughed at a widower setting a place for his dead wife. God, it's almost too easy. But I don't think it's the true story, and I'll tell you why. Because Spencer Dunmore didn't invent that cruelty. It was done to him first, at a dinner table, when he was 9 and soft and crying, by a man who told him that feeling things was contemptible. And Spencer believed him, the way a 9-year-old has to, and he spent 35 years passing it down, to his staff, to that kid with the bread, and very nearly into the next generation of a whole restaurant. Cruelty is almost never original. It's inherited. It's a thing that gets done to us, and then, if we're not careful, the thing we do. The man who stood up didn't have a superpower. He had a question, and it was the right one. Who taught you that this was something to be ashamed of? Because once you ask that, once you see that the man laughing at the widower is just an old wound walking around in a suit, you can't quite hate him anymore. You can stop him. You should stop him. But the stopping looks different when you understand it. It looks like sitting down in the empty chair instead of swinging at the man. I don't know what I'd have done at that table. I'd like to think I'd have stood up. But honestly, it's a lot easier to keep your eyes on your own plate and tell yourself it's not your business, and let an old man walk out into the dark alone. Most of us keep eating. And maybe that's the thing I keep turning over, that real strength. The kind worth having almost never looks like the hard men told us it would. It doesn't look like the loudest man in the room. It looks like the one who pulls the grieving stranger's chair out and sits down in it. That's the whole thing. That's all it ever was. This story is fictional, inspired by the kind of person we'd all like to believe is sitting 3 tables away. The one who knows that setting the place is braver than clearing it. If something in it landed for you, drop a comment and tell me about someone who pulled your chair out when you needed it, or an empty place you still set. I read them, and the quiet ones say the most. If you know someone who learned the hard men's lesson young and has been passing it down ever since, share this with them. It might be the thing that turns it. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. There's another one coming, and I think you'll want to be here for it. See you in the next one.